Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge, and today I am joined with Marcas Grant from NFL Network and Cody Reer from Smash Hit Sports. We're going to be talking about a bunch of players who are looking at very similar values in your fantasy drafts and discussing who you should choose when you are on the clock. This is a great episode that is going to help you prep for fantasy football draft season, so be sure to stick around to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. Do you prefer Alvin Kamara getting drafted as RB10 or Saquon Barkley getting drafted as RB11? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. Marcus, why don't you go ahead and start us off here? Between Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley getting drafted back-to-back in fantasy football drafts, who do you prefer this season?
I've really started to get in on Saquon Barkley in the last couple of weeks, in part because I can't think of a team that has more question marks in general than the New Orleans Saints. You know, I mean, they've got a brand new head coach. Yes, their offensive coordinator is the same, but it's a new head coach. What are we going to get from Jameis Winston? What is Michael Thomas going to be? How does Chris Olave fit? What does this all mean for Alvin Kamara? That, to me, is just a series of question marks that, look, it could all work out great. It could all work out sort of mediocre. But I feel like with Saquon, all the talk of has been he's going to get a heavy workload. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to get a ton of work. We know that when Saquon is right, this is a guy with top 5 upside. And look, I admit it's been a couple years since we have seen Saquon at his best. But I feel like he's a guy that really does have that huge upside when everything's right. They're going to funnel that offense through him. And, I was reading Matthew Betts, the fantasy PT, who does a lot of good work. Read him over at the Fantasy Footballers. He did a really nice piece on guys coming back from ACL tears. And usually it's that second year after the surgery when you see guys sort of get back to their previous form. So if we're going by that logic, this is year 2 for Saquon after the ACL surgery. He's just 25 years old, so he's certainly not old by any stretch of the imagination. So I would much rather take a shot at him a little bit later than Kamara.
Yeah, and saying just 25 years old, that's crazy because it feels like Saquon has been in the league for so long, but he was drafted as such a young guy. He is still very, very fresh, doesn't have a lot of usage on those legs. So we could see him go back to his rookie form. What really jumped out to me when kind of looking at Saquon Barkley that I didn't really notice last year was how involved he was in the receiving game. He was 8th in target share. He was 10th in route participation. I mean, really, he got his points through the air last year. We haven't seen him do it as a complete back in a few years now. You got to go back to his rookie year to see that, but we know what he's capable of when he gets a huge workload. So we could see it happen this year. Cody, same question to you, though. Do you prefer Alvin Kamara, or are you also with us on preferring Saquon Barkley at cost?
Look, I hate to all be in unison here, but I'm taking Saquon at cost as well. And Saquon led the Giants in touchdowns last year. He only had 4. I expect a lot of improvement out of this Giants offense under Brian Daboll coming away from that old regime. And if I'm going to take a shot on a running back who's been there and done that, give me Saquon. I like Kamara, but Marcus, like you said, you have how is Jameis going to look after his injury? What's Michael Thomas's role going to be in what is his first real football action in almost 2 years? They drafted Chris Olave. They brought in Jarvis Landry. There are so many question marks in that New Orleans offense. I'm going to take the tried and true with Saquon Barkley. And I know the injury thing, I get it. But that freak injury with his ankle against the Cowboys last year was just that. It was freak. I'm buying into Saquon Barkley at cost.
And yeah, before that ankle injury, we kind of saw some shades of the old Saquon. We saw like a 2 or 3 game stretch where he was looking electric, and then he just tweaked his ankle on, like you said, a fluke play that kind of derailed his whole season. So hopefully we have some better discourse throughout the show because personally, I think it's boring if we're all on a show just agreeing with each other the whole time. But I think we are all in agreement. We got a 3 for 3 here. Saquon over Alvin Kamara. Great start to the show. But let's go ahead and get into some quick introductions before we dive into some more here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode 43 of The Launchpad. Just a reminder, you can find this on all Footballguys channels now. So youtube.com/Footballguys. You can find it on the Footballguys podcast streams on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Last week, I was with Nick Whalen and Pat Fitzmaurice, and we were talking about some players to target in the mid-rounds. Today, I'm with NFL Network's Marcas Grant and Cody Reer, and we're just going to talk through some players who are close in ADP at the same positions and kind of who we prefer, like we just did with Saquon and Alvin Kamara. First off, let me introduce Marcas. Marcas, you have been on our Friday show last year, which was a blast. Thank you so much for making the time to come back again today. You can find Marcas over at NFL Network. 5 days a week in season? I mean, you guys stay busy over there. You're doing your thing over at 32-bit as well. Marcas, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you are going to be working on over the next couple of weeks before the season kicks off?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter at Marcas G, Marcasg. That's generally the best place to do it. I am an occasional TikToker, which you can find. It's my full name there, Marcas Grant, because I wasn't smart enough to actually sync all of my social media channels. But whatever. But yeah, we're still doing the NFL fantasy football podcast. Myself and Michael F. Florio. You can find that a couple times a week wherever you download podcasts. And we get going on Monday with NFL Fantasy Live, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Got the whole crew. It's me, it's Florio, it's Adam Rank, Kimmy Checks, Patrick Claybon, Cynthia Freeland, all of us there. So we will be plenty busy. I think we're also doing some other digital stuff. Don't quote me on all of this, but this is, I've hugged my family. I said goodbye to my parents, kissed my son, told him I love him, and I will see them all pretty much in January now.
That's how it goes. And I got to give huge props to NFL Network. We talked about this a little bit in Canton last weekend or 2 weekends ago, Marcus. But NFL Network has been leaning heavily into fantasy football, and you love to see it because I feel like, 5-6 years ago, you get some fantasy content sprinkled in here and there, but it seems to be the forefront of so many conversations now on NFL Network. So awesome to see fantasy football just getting deeper and deeper into the mainstream seemingly every single year. Thank you so much for making the time, Marcus, because I know this is a busy time of year. In the middle of the screen, I am joined with Cody. And Cody, we've been connected for a little while. Also had a chance to link up in Canton a couple weeks ago. You can find Cody over at Smash Hit Sports. You can also find him at Real Deal Fantasy. And that's why I thought you guys would be a pretty good match today. We all have a very good mutual friend in Laquan Jones. We've all worked with him and collaborated with him in the past. So, Cody, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you're going to be working on?
Yeah, like you said, I'm at Smash Hit Sports everywhere that there is social media. I actually launched the first episode of my podcast today, breaking down the first week of college football, some of the Big Ten action we got going on. But I will be talking football Tuesdays and Thursdays on my YouTube channel all season long, as well as doing some fantasy stuff with Laquan, like you said. So anywhere that you can find my social media, Smash Hit Sports, we're going to have all the content coming, and I cannot wait.
Awesome. And that's the kind of discourse we're looking for. Marcus, he can't link up his TikTok and his Twitter. And then Cody just drops it and Smash Hit Sports everywhere. I got it on lock on every platform. Well, let's go ahead and jump in because there are a lot of players I want to talk about. We talked about Saquon and Kamara. They're kind of going at the 1-2 turn. Shortly after those guys, there are two other running backs that I see consistently going back to back. And this is a really tough one for me. I'm above consensus on both of these guys, but I struggle when it comes to Aaron Jones getting drafted as RB12. Leonard Fournette is RB14. Cody, walk us through your thought process when you're trying to decide between Aaron Jones and Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, both of these guys have differing situations. Their offenses have changed a little bit this year, but the biggest thing with Leonard Fournette is missing all three of their interior offensive linemen from last season. Capo left for Cincinnati, Ali Marpet retired, and then Jensen is out for the year with that knee injury at center. So I'm not incredibly confident in how that Bucs offensive line is going to look. Obviously, they have Tristan Wirfs. He's going to be great. But Aaron Jones was incredible without Davante Adams in the mix when Davante Adams has been hurt the last couple of years. Obviously, that is a smaller sample size, but Aaron Rodgers trusts Aaron Jones. He's going to use him, especially inside the 20s. Give me Aaron Jones here, but man, is it close.
And I feel like we have heard all offseason about the trust with Aaron Rodgers and how valuable that is because this is the first time in a long time that we see a lot of new faces in Green Bay. And I think the two guys that he has the most rapport with, well, three guys, I'll throw Randall Cobb in there as well, going way back in the day. He might be on his final legs, but he's still there. But Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, Aaron Jones, those are the guys that get Aaron Rodgers. And you think that they're going to see some touches because of that trust. So great point there. And then also talking about the offensive line in Tampa. I mean, that's getting a little shaky there. Marcus, how are you feeling with Aaron Jones and Leonard Fournette? Do you have a strong stance between one or the other?
Well, first, I'm glad you asked Cody to go first on this one because, man, it's not an easy call here. I'm going to lean with Lenny. My pal Florio has been calling him league winner Lenny because of what he's done the last couple of years. And look, I think Cody's completely right when he talks about being concerned about that offensive line. I think it's something that is really, really hard to ignore. But I think what sort of helps Fournette in that area is the fact that right now the Bucs still believe in him as a 3-down back. And look, I have heard the drum beats for Rashaad White, right? I have seen his name pop up on my timeline. I see my old friend James Coe going bananas and talking about maybe taking Rashaad White in the 8th round. I'm like, James, I love you. It's a little bit nuts. I think when you talk about, though, having this offensive line and having issues, Fournette is sort of solid as a pass protector there, right? You talk about trust with Aaron Rodgers. Fournette has that trust with Tom Brady, and being able to protect your 45-year-old quarterback has to be of tantamount importance. I know White is sort of getting better in that respect, but I don't know that you need him learning on the job this year. So I think having Leonard Fournette be able to be on the field for all 3 downs is important. And look, if that offensive line is as shaky as we fear it might be, I think a lot of those opportunities turn into quick dump-offs for Fournette where he sort of racks up points. I mean, I look at, for instance, last year with Najee Harris, right? So much of his production came from Ben Roethlisberger freaking out and just dumping the ball off to him in emergency situations. We could see a lot of that with Leonard Fournette this year, but I think Aaron Jones is going to have an outstanding season. I think Rodgers is going to lean on him. It is a coin flip for me, but I will give the nod to Fournette in a photo finish here.
I'm with Fournette as well, and you talked about the pass protection, and that is that's one of the biggest deciding factors for me as well, Marcus. I mean, Rachaad White profiles as a great pass catcher, but he really struggles with pass protection. And this isn't Cam Newton that's playing quarterback right now in Tampa Bay. It's Tom Brady. Like the utmost importance right now in Tampa Bay is keeping Tom Brady upright and keeping him healthy. And I pulled the numbers. If you look last year, Leonard Fournette allowed 0 sacks on 39 pass blocking opportunities. Giovanni Bernard led up 2 sacks on 25 opportunities. Keyshawn Vaughn allowed a sack on 15. Ronald Jones allowed a sack on 10 pass blocking opportunities. So all of these guys were allowing Tom Brady to get teed off on, and that's not what you want if you're the Tampa Bay coaching staff. So I think that's why Leonard Fournette got this big contract, because he has blossomed into a phenomenal pass blocker. And because of that, I don't think he really comes off the field. So I'm with you. When I came out with my immediate rankings in May, right after the NFL draft, I had Leonard Fournette slotted in at RB5, and at the time, I didn't think that was too crazy. I got a lot of pushback. I've since pulled him down a little bit to kind of reflect the ADP, but to me, I can't understand why Leonard Fournette isn't going in the first round. He's a 3-down back on a prolific offense. He catches passes. He gets the goal line work. I mean, this is exactly what you want in a running back, right? Like he does it all, doesn't come off the field, and he's on a good offense. So
he had a couple
like
extra
Fournette.
Donuts in the offseason, and everybody sort of freaked out,
Exactly. And I mean, I think we're all guilty of it. I know I do the same thing during the winter, January, February, March. That's when I put on that winter weight. I pack on a few pounds.
Those wings during football season, we're guilty of the opposite of it. So he put it on during the summer. We put it on during the fall. It's fine.
Exactly. And I said it all off season when I hate even saying Fat Lenny, because that's what everyone was calling him on social media. I mean, this guy is just still in incredible shape, but I wasn't concerned in the slightest. I mean, he has the best nutritionists, personal trainers, you name it. And that weight just came off like that. And he looks great again. I have no fears about Leonard Fournette's conditioning this year. Now let's keep talking about some running backs, moving a little bit down the board. And ironically enough, the 2 top, I guess Travis Etienne isn't a rookie, but it's kind of a rookie season. It's the first time we get to see him play. Travis Etienne is getting drafted as RB19, and Breece Hall is getting drafted as RB20. We just got the reports a couple days ago that Michael Carter is still the RB1 in New York. I don't know how much I'm really buying into that, but let's talk about this one a little bit, Marcus, because really I don't have a strong take on either of these guys. Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, who do you prefer?
Yeah, I haven't quite bought into the Breece Hall hype, and I get it. I think he's a talented running back, but I think he's a talented running back who's going to be sharing time. And whether or not you believe Michael Carter is the RB1 or not, I don't think Michael Carter is going away. I mean, he had a pretty good rookie season. I think he's still going to be involved. So I think that is going to sort of naturally eat into Breece Hall's opportunity in an offense that, look, I know that people are saying the Jets look better this year. They look improved. We've heard that song how many years in a row now, so I will fully buy it when I see it. If this offense is just middling, if it's just meh, then I don't know how much that helps Breece Hall. I think, look, I don't think the Jaguars are necessarily world beaters, but I don't think it can be as bad as what it was last year with Urban Meyer. I think there's improvement there. And as much as look, I'll say this. I'm drafting James Robinson. I'm trying to draft him late in places and use him sort of as a 3rd or 4th running back, probably a 4th running back more realistically. He may be involved, but we don't know to what extent. We don't know how good he's going to look after that late season Achilles injury. I know we all hope for the Cam Akers type revival, but we really don't know. And so I think that at least opens up a path for Etienne to have a much bigger workload early in the season. I like his ability to catch the football. I love his speed. And, I like the fact that he has a rapport with his quarterback, right? I mean, he and Trevor Lawrence were together at Clemson. There is that connection there. So, sort of with you, Dave, I don't know that I'm really pounding the table for one guy or another, but, given the choice, which I guess is the whole point of this show, I'm taking Etienne ahead of Hall here.
Yeah, and both of these guys, I mean, really, you don't want a running back that's going to be in a split backfield on a subpar offense, and that's what both of these guys might end up being this season. But Cody, same question to you. Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, do you have a strong take on either of them, or are you kind of with Marcus where you're not really feeling too great about either of these guys?
See, I'm the opposite honestly. I'm higher than consensus on both of these guys. However, I do have Etienne over Hall. Like you said, the connection with Trevor Lawrence is going to be there, but I think that Travis Etienne is the best playmaker in that Jaguars offense. And if Peterson has any sort of brain to him, which we know he does, he's a great coach. He's going to get his best playmaker the football in space and allow him to do what Travis Etienne did best at Clemson, and that is make people miss in the open field. I love Travis Etienne this season. His over-under for rushing and receiving yards was at 1,025. I think he absolutely smashes that this season. And I think he'll be great for your fantasy football team. The issue I have with Breece Hall, not only do you have that possible split backfield, I don't know how much I necessarily believe it, but there is more crowded for targets and red zone work in that offense. They brought in CJ Uzama. They brought in Garrett Wilson. Elijah Moore is an incredibly talented wide receiver. I think there's a lot more targets to go around, especially in a PPR league. So give me Etienne over Breece Hall.
Yeah.
Is it disturbing to either of you guys that all the Jets receivers are sort of yeah, Joe Flacco, I like catching footballs from Joe Flacco. That seems like bad news after you went out and spent a lot of draft capital on Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw it, Marcus. I ran a poll today saying, would you rather build an NFL franchise around Zach Wilson or Davis Mills? And Davis Mills is leading the poll. I don't think I've ever seen a guy get drafted top 3 and just have everybody just immediately out on him after 1 year. But yeah, when you got players saying stuff like that, I saw that. I think what it was, Garrett Wilson, I think he said a more receiver-friendly ball. Is that how he worded it?
Yeah.
Not looking too good. But like I said, both of these guys are probably going to be in split backfields. And that's why I'm leaning towards Etienne as well. Because if you're going to be in a split backfield, I think what you want, especially if a team probably isn't going to be scoring 30, 35 points every single week, I think you want the guy that's going to be catching passes because he's going to be in late in the game in garbage time. He's going to rack up more points in PPR. Dan Henry over at Footballguys just did a study showing that a target in a PPR league is worth 2.5 times as much as a carry. So just looking at that type of usage, Travis Etienne profiles as a guy that is going to be seeing more points and more opportunities. So I'm with Etienne as well. The last running backs that I want to talk about, though, and again, these guys are getting drafted back to back, RB30 and RB31, and their situations could not be more similar. Both of these guys got red hot at the end of the season, and then both of them had an early drafted running back added to the squad. I'm talking about Rashaad Penny at RB30 and Devin Singletary at RB31. Cody, talk me through these two a little bit. Who do you prefer at cost this year? Not even at cost because they're getting drafted back to back. Who do you prefer?
I don't love either of these guys, but I'm going to take Devin Singletary. He is far and above in a much better situation offensively in Buffalo than what they have in Seattle. Penny hasn't played 11 plus games since 2018. So I don't trust that this is the year that we're finally going to see that. So couple that with the fact that they brought in Kenneth Walker, who I think was incredible at Michigan State last year. I'm going to lean with Devin Singletary. I don't see him. Devin Singletary is obviously not a 3-down back, but if you want to put value to touches, I think the touches in Buffalo are going to be significantly more valuable than the touches that you are going to see in that Seattle offense.
Yeah, and can we, I mean, what is in the water in Seattle? Because we're already getting reports that Rashaad Penny's getting banged up in camp, and Kenneth Walker is getting banged up in camp, and Chris Carson had to retire. I mean, I just want to see, it seems like so many talented backs just keep going into Seattle and can't stay healthy, and I really hope that we can see it from Penny this year, but like you said, we haven't throughout his entire career. I mean, is he the guy that we saw for the first 3.5 years of his career, or the guy we saw down the stretch in 2021? Marcus, looking at these two guys, Rashaad Penny and Devin Singletary, who do you prefer?
You know what? As as weird as it may seem, I think I'd like to take the swing on Rashaad Penny. And I love Devin Singletary, right? I agree. He is in the much better offense. I don't think there's a debate there. My fear in Buffalo is that it becomes kind of a muddled three-headed mess, right? You've got Singletary there. James Cook's going to come in and catch some footballs. And, contrary to what we all want to believe, I don't think Zach Moss is totally done there. I mean, there have been some reports that they still like Moss. They still want to work him in. He's probably the third of those three backs. But, if he ends up getting some run, and I guess we can't forget that, Josh Allen has been the de facto goal line back the whole time he's been in the league. That sort of worries me that's going to be very muddled there. Then let's also, go into the fact that, Stephon Diggs is going to get opportunities. Gabe Davis is everybody's favorite second wide receiver this year. Dawson Knox is going to get some looks down near the goal line. There's just so many places for the Bills to go with the football that it does sort of scare me a little bit. And not to say that there's not risk, obviously, with Rashaad Penny. The injury factor can't be ignored, right? Because that has been the story of his career so far. But I do feel like at least there's a little more clarity in the sense that it's going to be Penny and or Ken Walker getting most of those opportunities. I'm not worried about the Travis Homers of the world or the DJ Dallas still there, right? Like, those guys don't really worry me. I think they're still around mostly for special teams usage. So I think it's at least a two-headed situation in Seattle versus a three-headed situation. But I mean, I will concede that game script could force Penny out of a lot of situations late, but I'm just sort of banking that, even if he stays moderately healthy, right? If I can get 13, 14 games out of Rashaad Penny, hopefully that explosiveness that we saw at the end of the last season shows up a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, Marcus, the only thing I'll push back, I agree with you on Rashaad Penny. I just don't think that he's going to get pushed out of game scripts because Pete Carroll could be down 35-10 in the fourth quarter and he's still going to be running the rock. I mean, he is going to find a way. He is going to find a way to get Rashaad Penny the ball. And something that wasn't even mentioned is, Rashaad Penny, it's not like he just got hot the final few games of the season, stumbled in the end zone and put up some good fantasy points. He legitimately looked like one of the best running backs in football. And injuries have been the only thing that have really kind of marred his career up until this point. He's a former first-round pick. I mean, he's got all of the tools to be a premier running back in the league. Injury risk is the only reason he's not getting drafted, top 15 or top 20 this year. So if he can stay healthy, we know that he's got the chops to be a fantastic running back. So again, Cody, I'm going to side with Marcus a little bit on this one. I love Rashaad Penny. I just feel like I'm setting myself up to get hurt again drafting Rashaad Penny. But after what I saw last year down the stretch, I just can't help myself. I mean, this guy has what it takes to be a fantastic running back. Now let's switch and talk about some wide receivers, and we'll keep this first one easy. We're starting at the tippy-tip top. It seems like Cooper Kupp was the unanimous wide receiver one all offseason, and then just over the last couple of weeks, we started to see this switch. All of a sudden, Justin Jefferson is getting drafted as the wide receiver one. I've seen him going 101 in some drafts. So, Marcus, start us off here. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson. You can't really go wrong with either, but who do you prefer?
I was gonna say this is a no-lose situation, right? I mean, I guess because we like shiny new things, we're always looking for the next big thing. I guess I go with Justin Jefferson. I will say I was fortunate enough to actually get to interview him this offseason at the Pro Bowl practice, and he was a really fun dude. I asked him, actually, I said, who's more likely to get to 2,000 yards in a season? First, is it you or Jamar Chase? And he immediately said, it's going to be me. He said, in fact, as soon as I'm done, I'm going to text Jamar Chase and I'm going to tell him that I'm going to beat him to 2,000 yards. But, I will say that I think what I love is that I think we sort of know where Jefferson is. We know where he stands in that offense. And not that we don't know what's up with Kupp, but I think Allen Robinson is going to cut into Kupp's opportunities a little much this year. I love Allen Robinson, especially where he's coming off the board. I love A-Rob. I don't know that Jefferson has hit his ceiling yet, and I wonder if Kevin O'Connell can get him there. But, I think you can't go wrong with either one of those guys. But, hey, just for, to change it up from last year, right? Let's go with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare that we see a guy repeat as the wide receiver one in back-to-back seasons. And, we saw last year Cooper Kupp just thrived in this offense where he was open on every single play. Like we saw it, we're sitting there in week 15, week 16 at the end of the season saying, why aren't they stopping Cooper Kupp? I mean, they were just scheming plays to get him wide open. And now Kevin O'Connell is the head coach in Minnesota. He's going to be running that same exact type of offense. And Justin Jefferson will be in that Cooper Kupp role. So I agree with you. I don't think we've seen anything close to Justin Jefferson's ceiling yet. Cody, are you on the Justin Jefferson wide receiver one train as well, or are you sticking with Cooper Kupp after what he did last year?
I am on the Jefferson train. Like you said, Kevin O'Connell's really got like the difference between what Kevin O'Connell is going to bring to this offense to what Mike Zimmer's team has done the last 3-4 years. It's going to be incredible to watch. And Justin Jefferson had that quote earlier in the preseason, which I know it's just a quote, but him saying, yeah, now I understand why Cooper Kupp was open so much last year. It's going to be incredibly fun to watch. That being said, I have literally written in my notes, it's like picking between a Benz and a Bentley. Like it's a no-lose situation here. These guys are both absolutely incredible. And I understand everybody likes to use the word regression in fantasy football. Cooper Kupp could regress and still be the wide receiver one. That's not out of the realm of possibilities. That being said, give me Justin Jefferson. Love him this year out of the Bayou.
Before we get on to the next one, Marcus, I just want to throw this to you real quickly. You said that you're a big fan of Allen Robinson, and I am too. I mean, as a Bears fan, I've always loved this guy. I think that he is just primed to bounce back. Just wondering where you have him ranked this year, because that's definitely one of my bigger flag plants. I have him inside my wide receiver 1 range as my wide receiver 12 overall.
Oh, you're probably slightly higher than I am, but I've got him at like wide receiver 15. I mean, I don't think it's out of the range of outcomes for him to finish in the wide receiver 1 range. I mean, I think we saw that before in a Sean McVay offense. You know, when you had Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods both doing their thing at a high level, both those guys are productive, and I don't see why you couldn't. Now you've got a better quarterback in Matthew Stafford than you had with Jared Goff, so I don't see why that couldn't happen with A-Rob and Kupp this year.
Yeah, and we saw how quickly Odell Beckham was able to adapt and carve out a role in that offense as well. I love it, Marcus, because I know Mike Florio, I know that he's really big on A-Rob as well this year. So, yeah, expecting big things from him. Really hoping he could bounce back. Just one of my favorite players. But let's keep working down the board a little bit on wide receivers. And the next guys I want to talk about both find themselves in new situations, new teams, new quarterbacks. I'm talking about Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown, were each traded. Tyreek Hill now on the Miami Dolphins getting drafted as wide receiver 9. A.J. Brown on the Philadelphia Eagles getting drafted as wide receiver 10. Marcus, start us off here. Which of these two do you prefer?
Well, it's funny because I like both their quarterbacks too. Like I'm a believer in Tua this year. Obviously, like everybody else, I love Jalen Hurts, but I'm going to go with A.J. Brown because I think I like Jalen Hurts more than I like Tua. I think both of these teams have sort of narrow target funnels, but I think A.J. Brown's going to eat. I know that there was, the question was, does moving from Tennessee to Philadelphia help or hurt him? I'm like, I don't think it hurts at all. I think both these guys are going to be really, really good, but I think maybe it's because you can get Brown slightly later than Tyreek Hill. I think both of them are going to be outstanding, but give me A.J. Brown for the draft prize.
Yeah, and then, it's just wild how similar these players are. Both of them were traded right around the draft for first-round picks. Both of them have a wide receiver, too, who is a sophomore coming off a very, productive rookie season. So it is wild how similar their situations are right now, and it's kind of funny that they're getting drafted back-to-back. Cody, same question to you, though. A.J. Brown or Tyreek Hill, who do you prefer?
I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill, and it's one of those volume is king things, right? Tyreek Hill plays in that Miami Dolphins offense. They were 8th in pass attempts per game last year. The Eagles just 29th in pass attempts per game. Obviously, when you acquire a weapon like A.J. Brown, your pass attempts are going to go up. I don't expect the Eagles to be in that bottom tier of pass attempts again this year. However, I expect Miami to continue to pass the football. Their running game isn't incredibly impressive. So give me Tyreek Hill. I just think he has a better opportunity than what A.J. Brown's seeing. However, they're both great.
Yeah, and we hear all the time, like, oh, who's going to be the next Deebo Samuel? Like, is anybody in the NFL able to play that Deebo Samuel role? If there's anybody that can do it, I think it's Tyreek Hill. I was actually mind blown to read this. Jeff Bell, a good friend of mine, just recently wrote an article on Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill was a running back in college. He didn't start playing wide receiver until he hit the NFL. So if there's anybody that can pound it between the tackles, take these jet sweeps, I mean, speed, you can't teach speed. And Tyreek Hill is arguably one of the fastest guys in the NFL. So we might see some sort of wide back type role for Tyreek Hill in this Mike McDaniel offense. I'm not even going to make a decision on this one between the two because they are neck and neck for me. I think you guys both made really strong arguments. Let's move on to the next one. And these are also wide receivers who find themselves in new situations and on new teams. JuJu Smith-Schuster, now playing with the Kansas City Chiefs, is getting drafted as wide receiver 28. Right after him, Amari Cooper with the Cleveland Browns is getting drafted as wide receiver 30. Obviously, looking at these two situations, JuJu Smith-Schuster has the better quarterback, but Amari Cooper has better career production. So I think you can make a good argument for either of these guys. Cody, start us off here. JuJu or Amari?
Yeah, I absolutely have to lean JuJu Smith-Schuster here. By week 11 and 12 and 13, when Deshaun Watson finally does come back, I think Amari Cooper could be great in the fantasy playoffs. However, I want a guy who's going to be great for me all season. JuJu Smith-Schuster has the potential to do that. He's shown wide receiver one ability. And I understand that Amari Cooper does have better career-long production, but let's not act like JuJu Smith-Schuster hasn't done it before in Pittsburgh. So when you have the potential to be the wide receiver one in a Patrick Mahomes offense, I'm absolutely going to shoot for that sort of upside, especially at the wide receiver 3 spot, than the upside you get when you're the wide receiver one in a Jacoby Brissett offense.
Yeah, and it's such a weird role trying to think schematically what this Chiefs offense can look like without Tyreek Hill, and then the players that they brought in, none of them really profile to take on a Tyreek Hill type role. So I don't really know what to expect, but like you said, JuJu could be the wide receiver one. Marcus, I saw you nodding along. Are you with JuJu over Amari as well?
Yeah, it's JuJu for me. It's not particularly close. I don't want any parts of the Browns offense. I mean, maybe you can talk me into Nick Chubb with Jacoby Brissett there, just because they're not, you can't lean on Brissett to try to win football games for you. You try to, if you're the Browns, I think you try to shorten the game as much as possible, grind it out, and so maybe Chubb has some value. But even when Deshaun Watson comes back, I mean, we're talking about a guy who hasn't played any football in a couple of years. And how long does it take him to sort of get back into the flow of real, actual football? I mean, even in his preseason stuff, he didn't look particularly great. So how long does it take him to get back into the flow of things? So I think JuJu has a really good opportunity. Like Cody mentioned, I mean, he's 2 seasons removed. I know last year was the injury year, unfortunately for him. The year before that, though, he caught 97 passes. Admittedly, because Roethlisberger couldn't push it down the field, they sort of turned JuJu into a tight end. But he still caught 97 passes, right? So I still think he has opportunity to go out and do some big things. I will say this. I don't think there's no way to replace Tyreek Hill with one guy, right? So I think it's going to be some combination of, JuJu and MVS and Skyy Moore sort of working in there. But of those three, I think it's Smith-Schuster who ends up getting the majority of those vacated targets.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what this Chiefs offense is going to look like. I think of all the teams that are going to be playing in a few weeks, that's the team I'm most excited to see because they have so many new pieces there. And Patrick Mahomes is obviously a fantastic quarterback, but this is going to be the first kind of challenge that we've seen where he has a little bit of a barren roster and he's going to have to do it on his own with some new faces. So I'm really excited to see what this looks like. The last group of wide receivers I want to talk about, we're not just doing a 1-and-1 here. For whatever reason, the way that ADP is shaken out, there is a whole bundle of rookie wide receivers that are getting drafted right by each other. And I'm talking about Chris Olave, Treylon Burks, Skyy Moore, and Garrett Wilson. Chris Olave going as wide receiver 45, Treylon Burks, wide receiver 46, Skyy Moore, wide receiver 48, and Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 51. Cody, Marcus, start us off here. Which of these rookie wide receivers do you prefer?
I think I want Chris Olave out of this group. And look, for a multitude of reasons, right? I think Skyy Moore has the best quarterback, hands down, of this group. But I think he is going to be battling, as I mentioned just a moment ago, between JuJu and MVS to get a lot of those targets. I think Garrett Wilson will get a lot of targets, but what quality of targets will they be if we're talking about it either being Joe Flacco or most likely Zach Wilson for the majority of the season? Treylon Burks, sort of similar situation, right? I mean, Ryan Tannehill is who he is. There's nothing really exciting about him. I know there's been the talk of him sort of being banged up all throughout training camp. And, I think you do wonder about his ability to stay on the field long term. So I think in terms of situation and quarterback, Olave sort of encompasses the best of all of them. They're all imperfect, right? They all have their flaws in some way or another. But I think Olave is maybe the least flawed of that group. And, look, if Jameis is right, and we get the Jameis that we saw a few years ago in Tampa, there's a lot of touchdown upside there for him. So I think that of that group, he's the guy that I would probably target first.
Yeah, Olave was kind of the guy in like the dynasty and fantasy communities, wasn't getting any sort of buzz before the draft whatsoever. And you talk to scouts and NFL guys, they loved Chris Olave, but he just didn't have the measurables. When we were looking at the data and looking at how people profile, nobody really got too excited about Chris Olave, but the thing you consistently hear about him is that he is the most pro-ready of all of these guys, that he can step on a field and just play week one and produce right off the bat. So I think looking from a redraft standpoint especially, that's what's alluring there. But it's also kind of funny that out of all of these guys, 3 of them were top 12 picks. And then Skyy Moore, just because of his landing spot, is the second rounder that's all of a sudden getting drafted with these guys that went top 12 in the NFL draft. Cody, same question to you, though, between Wilson, Burks, Olave, and Skyy Moore. Who do you prefer?
Yeah, this one for me is really between Olave and Garrett Wilson. I like Treylon Burks long term, but I don't think he's really set up for success this season. And Skyy Moore, while a great talent, he's going to be fighting for competition in that Kansas City offense. So I like Garrett Wilson. I think he has the chance to be a number one wide receiver in this league. However, Olave on that offense led by Jameis Winston. I know we said there are a lot of question marks. I think that actually leads to Olave's benefit here. If Michael Thomas does not look like himself, he could be slotted into that number one wide receiver role fairly quickly in New Orleans. And New Orleans traded up to go and get him. So I'm confident in Olave. I'm not super confident in some of the others. And when you're trying to project, a wide receiver 4 or 5 where these guys are going, I want a guy who has a chance to be the number one. And I think Olave has exactly that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I got nothing to push back. I love me some Chris Olave, a guy that I've been drafting nonstop all offseason. Let's move on to talk about some quarterbacks here. And the first two that I want to talk about are both very firmly in that elite tier of quarterbacks, getting drafted as a QB4 and QB5, Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray. Both of these guys, have it within their range of outcomes that they can rush for 1,000 yards, throw for another 3,500 or 4,000. I mean, they have QB1 overall inside their range of outcomes. But with them getting drafted back to back, Cody, who do you prefer, Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray?
I understand that a lot of fantasy football is played with analytics and numbers, and I'm an engineer by trade. Numbers are my friend. However, sometimes you play fantasy football with your eyes and your gut and your heart, and I'm going to take Lamar Jackson over Kyler here. Lamar, I understand that they lost Hollywood Brown, and Kyler Murray is getting the beneficiary of that in receiving Hollywood Brown, but I think Lamar is going to have an outstanding season. I think the Ravens offensively are really slept on for the most part. They're not even the favorites to win their division. I think they should be. This was a Ravens team that was decimated by injuries last year. And looking at that offense, having Bateman healthy, having Mark Andrews healthy for the full year, and bringing in guys like Isaiah Likely, I think that Ravens offense can really turn around from last season. I think Lamar Jackson's going to have an incredible year. So give me Lamar on this one. But Kyler's good, man. He is good.
He's really good. The problem with Kyler is that he always flames out at the end of the season and in the playoffs, and fantasy managers with their goldfish brains always forget. We get this short recency bias and we say, yeah, well, Kyler Murray was terrible in the playoffs. And it seems like once again, Kyler's a value. For the record, Cody, I'm with you. I do prefer Lamar Jackson over him, but these are both of my favorite guys to draft so far this year at cost. Marcus, between Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, do you have a strong take on either one or the other?
I think I prefer Lamar. I don't, this isn't to, say that Kyler is a bum or anything like that. The thing that worries me about Kyler is just that, last year he didn't run quite as much. And I don't know if it was him sort of being a little bit concerned after he had that shoulder injury. Remember, he hurt the shoulder and he just wasn't really the same after that. You wonder whether or not that sort of stuck in his head. Also for Lamar, factor in that we hope J.K. Dobbins is going to be there, but we're not really sure exactly what he's going to be. The Ravens have taken a very wait-and-see approach with J.K. Dobbins this offseason, so you wonder about that. We know Gus Edwards is going to start the year on the PUP list. I've seen people asking me about, hey, what do I do about Mike Davis? And I'm like, you leave Mike Davis alone. You thank him for his service and you find somebody else to draft for your fantasy roster. So the rushing upside we know is obviously going to be there with Lamar. I'm hoping this is the year they allow him to cut it loose a little bit more as a passer. I mean, this is a passing offense that has never really been able to sustain more than 2 pass catchers, right? We know that Mark Andrews is going to occupy a large target share. Presumably, Rashaad Bateman slides into that role that is vacated by Marquise Brown. Hopefully, we find room for a third pass catcher, whether that's, I don't know who it's going to be. If it's Isaiah Likely, who I know is the new hotness right after what he did last week.
Duvernay.
If it's Devin Duvernay, right? If it's one of those guys, but hopefully there's room for a third. If we can find a third pass catcher, then I think we get Lamar closer to his MVP season of a few years ago, because I think we've always sort of been chasing that, and he hasn't quite gotten there, not through any fault of his own necessarily. Some of it is the situation around him. It's been injuries, what have you. But if we can, see him sort of elevate himself as a passer, we know that he's got the potential to lock in, 800, 900, 1,000 rushing yards. It's just that other thing that he hasn't had Not because I don't think he can throw. I think he's a really good passer. I just don't think the system has really allowed him to excel in that regard.
Yeah, and then both of these players are in similar situations. Even with Lamar getting drafted a year earlier, both of them had some contract disputes this offseason. And just looking at how they've handled the situations, they've been so different. Where everything about Kyler Murray, like down to like the little fine print in his contracts, was talked about publicly and scrutinized by the media. And then Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, hasn't gotten the contract, but you almost don't hear a peep about it. He's showing up to practice, he's doing what he's supposed to, and Lamar Jackson just strikes me as the type that isn't going to try to twist the arm of anybody in Baltimore. He's just going to go out there and have a fantastic season, make a deep playoff run, put up another MVP type season, and increase his value and force them to pay him that money next year. So, that's kind of the narrative behind Lamar Jackson that I think a lot of people aren't talking about is with that contract year, he might come out and play some of the best football of his life this year, just as a way to, try to maximize his value as much as he can to get that contract. So, love me some Lamar Jackson this year. The only other quarterbacks I want to talk about are two guys who were both drafted very highly last year and were both huge disappointments. Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are getting drafted back-to-back as QB 17 and QB 18. Marcus, start us off here. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. We're probably talking 2 quarterback or super flex leagues here. You're not drafting these guys in single QB leagues, but who do you prefer between these year 2 guys?
I'm still believing in Trevor Lawrence. Mostly because I feel like the Jaguars at least have made an effort to try and support him. I don't know that I can say the same thing about the Bears and what they did this offseason with Justin Fields. Like, I just don't feel like they have really put a lot around him necessarily. I mean, we spent a long part of the offseason talking about how Velus Jones is like ready for AARP, right? And he was like their guy that they went out and drafted. So like I said earlier, like I don't think it can be worse for the Jaguars than what it was last year under Urban Meyer. And I know that we love Justin Fields' rushing ability, but look, Trevor Lawrence can run too, right? And we're not going to confuse him for, say, a Lamar Jackson or a Jalen Hurts, but he can run enough that he can hurt an opposing defense and that he can get you some of those cheat code points. So, I'm not ready to totally give up on either of them, but give me Lawrence over Fields.
All right. As a Bears fan, that hurts me to say, Cody, can you please take Justin Fields here? Sing me a song about Justin Fields and why he's going to bounce back, or are you on the Trevor Lawrence train as well?
I hate to disappoint you here, Dave, but we're on Trevor Lawrence. Neither of these guys are exactly the Konami code quarterbacks that you're looking for in fantasy, but they do have that rushing upside. I just think the Jags are better set up for success offensively. That Bears offensive line could be in that bottom 10, bottom 5 range this year. And I think that's really going to put Justin Fields in a tough spot. Darnell Mooney's a great weapon, and I think he's good. And Cole Kmet's pretty solid in Chicago. But outside of that, you really have a lot of questions. And I think, the Jaguars spent money trying to get Trevor Lawrence some help. So I'm going to lean towards Trevor here.
Fair enough. Let me make one quick argument for you guys for Justin Fields real quickly. Obviously, we know this guy wasn't supposed to start early in the season. He was kind of forced out with a week 2 injury to Andy Dalton. And his first few games were terrible, kind of what you'd expect. He wasn't ready for it, didn't get any first-team reps. What gives me a little bit of excitement is if you look at the last 4 games that Justin Fields played, he averaged 64 rushing yards per game per game over those final 4 games. Looking at that over a full season, you're looking at 1,088 yards. Now, I don't think that he's going to rush for that much, but I think that he has it within his range of outcomes that he might be able to hit that 700-800 yard mark and put up a Jalen Hurts type season, even without a good surrounding cast around him. So maybe I'm being blinded right now. Maybe I've got my navy and orange glasses on and I'm looking at this through the wrong lens, but I feel like there is some rushing upside with Justin Fields, even if this Bears team wins 2, 3, or 4 games, which even as a Bears fan, I fully expect him to. I don't think this is going to be a good team, but I think there is a possibility that Justin Fields can do something for fantasy purposes. That's enough of my spiel. Yeah,
I'll say this real quick too. Not having Matt Nagy there is going to be a big deal, right? I mean, Nagy's game plan did him no favors whatsoever. And in one of those preseason games, Doug Farrar, who does great work over USA Today, he pointed out that what you're seeing early on is they're getting Fields out of the pocket. They're moving him around. They're giving him some easier throws. So, yeah, overall, it may not be great, but at least you have a coaching staff now that is trying to coach to Fields' strength. So, if anything, if there's a silver lining, that might be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, they really tried turning Fields into a pocket passer last year, which he can throw the ball well, but that's just not his game. You got to get him out there. Last question before we move off this. Who was a worse coach last year, Matt Nagy or Urban Meyer?
Oh, Urban. I mean, like
Yeah.
Matt Nagy was bad on the field. Like Urban was bad everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, it's got to be Urban there.
And Matt Nagy never kicked a player, at least as far as I have
Never
heard
kicked a
of. So at
player.
least he's got that.
He never got a lap dance at a bar or anything like that. You know?
He set an incredibly low bar, but man, Matt Nagy hurdles that far and away.
I am looking forward to the 2021 Jacksonville Jaguars 30 for 30 that'll come out at some point, giving us all the dirt on Urban Meyer and what happened that year. Let's move on to tight ends, though, to wrap up this show. And these two guys that I want to talk about are both phenomenal talents. I feel like picking one over the other isn't even fair because they're both so good. But George Kittle at tight end 4 and Darren Waller at tight end 5. Marcus, start us off here. Who do you prefer out of these guys?
It's funny because in the last week or so, I've sort of, been shying away from both of them, but give me Kittle over Waller. One, I think having Devontae Adams show up there in Vegas takes a lot of food off of his plate. First of all, I mean, one, you don't trade for a guy like Devontae Adams and then give him the bag like that unless you're going to feature him. Throw in the fact that his quarterback is also his old college buddy, and they did big things together in Fresno for a couple of years. So I think that immediately takes away from Waller. Plus, now these reports that Waller's sort of banged up, and I think that's something to sort of monitor. So give me Kittle over him. Although I'll say this, my concerns with Kittle, one, partially because he is so good in the run game, he is sort of a de facto sixth lineman for the 49ers, which maybe limits his potential route production there. The other thing is, and granted, it's a pretty small sample size, but you go back and you look at who Trey Lance was targeting. It was, Debo, obviously, no surprise primarily, and then Brandon Ayuk right behind him. Kittle was well down the list of guys that target. I know that Kittle was banged up at parts of the season last year, and like I said, it's a small sample size, but you just wonder whether or not Lance and Kittle are going to have that same rapport that George Kittle and Jimmy Garoppolo did. So I do have some concerns. I still think they're among the elite tight ends at the position. But I do have my worries about them, but I still would go Kittle ahead of Waller.
Yeah, it's kind of, like the question you have to answer when you're in an interview, like what's your biggest strength or your biggest weakness, and you try to talk about a strength, but really with George Kittle, his biggest weakness in fantasy football is how good of a blocker he is. Like you said, he plays pretty much a sixth lineman out there, and it really caps his upside. And then he has those games where he just completely disappears because all they're asking of him is to block. And like you said, these guys are both in the elite tier tight ends. I've been drafting all offseason. I'm not sure what happened with how fantasy managers are looking at the game, but it seemed like all offseason there was this tier of tight ends where it was Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, and Darren Waller. And for whatever reason, just in the last 2 weeks, Kyle Pitts has skyrocketed. He is now going at the 2-3 turn, getting drafted right next to Mark Andrews. So I'm not sure what fantasy managers finally saw over the last couple of weeks that made them fall in love with Kyle Pitts, but it seems like these two guys are in a tier of their own now, below the top 3. Cody, same question to you, though. George Kittle or Darren Waller?
Yeah, if you asked me this question in July, my answer would have been different. I would have said Waller. While I'm not incredibly scared of bringing in Adams, I think that actually kind of frees up that offense a little bit. They didn't have an incredible outside wide receiver last year. I know Hunter Renfrow was great for them, but they needed a good outside presence. And I listened to an interview with Darren Waller earlier this offseason, and he said he's super excited because he won't have to see the number one corner anymore. And I think that really opens it up for what Darren Waller can do because he doesn't line up as an inline tight end a ton. That being said, that hamstring injury that he's had the last couple of weeks really have me concerned for what his start of the year is going to look like. So I'm going to take George Kittle. And I agree that his upside is capped a little bit. He's never had more than 6 touchdowns in a season. He gets a lot of his fantasy production in between the 20s rather than in the red zone. But that 49ers offense could look very, very good with Trey Lance. And I'm going to take a dart on that over Darren Waller, who, if he starts out a little, injured, isn't going to be great for your fantasy team.
Yeah, and it definitely is concerning. And just talking, format and how important that is, George Kittle's a guy that I really like in best ball, where, you don't have to worry about when to start him. When he has those huge spike weeks where he goes for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns, cool, you got those points. But he also has those games where I think he's just going to completely disappear. Shanahan really kind of game plans around one specific player. And like we said, sometimes George Kittle is just going to block for an entire game. So it does make me a little bit nervous about drafting him in leagues where I have to set a lineup and manage that every single week. But guys, we covered just about everybody today. I mean, we really are going to help some fantasy managers out. I love doing this show this time of year because everyone's going to be drafting this weekend and next weekend, and we're helping them out with some of those difficult draft situations that they will be looking at themselves in just a few days. Thank you both so much for making the time. Before we log off, one more time, Marcus, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, on Twitter at Marcas G, on TikTok at Marcas Grant. I think that's pretty much it. That's all that's useful for everybody.
And yeah, normally it's on social media. Let everyone know where they can find you on TV as well. When the show airs and what channel they can find you on.
Sure. Actually, NFL Network starting on Monday, August 29th, 6 p.m. Eastern, NFL Fantasy Live. We are 5 days a week. I guess I should plug the podcast too, the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast with me and Mike F. Florio. That's Mondays and Wednesdays. Actually, we also have a streaming show. It's a podcast and a digital streaming show. So I think that may run on NFL.com and the NFL Fantasy app. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the best place to find them. So yeah, I'm going to be up to my neck in content creation for the next few months.
And don't get me wrong, I love the launch pad, love what we do over here at Football Guys, but cream of the crop over there at NFL Network. Definitely want to watch that show on TV. Such a fun show to watch. I watch it every single day in season. It's a blast. So thanks for everything you do, Marcus. Cody, before we sign off, same thing. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media, YouTube, all that good stuff.
Yeah, unlike Marcus, I don't have the face for TV, so you can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at Smash Hits Sports. And new podcast just dropped today, Smash Hits Sports. It's on Spotify and Anchor, so if you want to check that out, I will see you there, but I can't wait.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for making the time today. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched this week's episode of The Launchpad. Just a reminder to subscribe on our YouTube page. That's youtube.com/footballguys. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, and I will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope that you were able to pull away some valuable information from this episode. Drop us a thumbs up below and leave us a comment if you've got anything to add. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/footballguys. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.